Righto, let's be sure the mic is on and let's get started. We are talking about Total Recall today. One of those Arnold Schwarzenegger movies that people love and moan on and on about and quote and stuff about a man with false memories who saves the people of Mars from corrupt evil corporations and gets the girl and questions if his memories are real or not. And it's this big corny action film with Martian mutants and long dead alien technology and all sorts. And so they remade it at one point. And that remake is set on Earth, set on one side of the planet with a little elevator that goes through the middle of the Earth from that side to the other side of the planet in order to let all the poor people from the poor side of the planet go and work on the rich people side of the planet with all the rich people, in a pretty transparent metaphor for people not being able to afford real estate in the cities they live in and work in and such. Now, there's this whole spooky, evil, sucky planet side with all the seedy nightlife, and there's a really cool one with all the factories and the rich apartments and the magnetic flying cars. Poverty lines, poverty gaps, that sort of stuff. The main character is a hard-working factory worker who stays honest and jokes with his fellow employees but gets the short end of the stick, even as though he's trying his best the whole way through. He's got a wife and he's got an apartment, and the apartment is hot as hell, and he's a proper working class hero, and he ends up going to a place where you can get fake memories, and he ends up getting memories of a fake adventure as a spy implanted, except then he turns into a super spy hero and has to escape the cops coming to kill him in their silly CGI based technology, their taser guns, and their evil robot army of poor murdering drones. The only real difference between this and the original being, of course, that it's not on Mars this time, and there weren't robots in the original, but he still used a bunch of silly CGI special effects weapons and stuff. Now, the evil robot army of poor murdering drones is going to murder all of the world's poor people so that the rich people can steal their land and resources. This is bad, of course, because all the world's poor in this film includes white working middle class people with American accents instead of the usual scary-looking bearded men like the world's poor that the evil army of poor murdering drones is allowed to attack in our world. Thankfully, our working-class American hero is able to use guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the oppressive government surveillance so that he can kill their invading army and save his fellow... This film is a bit of a symbolic mess. The rich man land is set in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and hopefully Northern Ireland, because they say that the only land on Earth that's still safe is the United Kingdom, and leaving a scary amount of Ireland to die for no real reason would be pretty horrible. And what about the Isle of Wight? Is the Isle of Wight still inhabitable? Are all the other bits just off the coast of Great Britain still inhabitable? And on top of that, the other side of the world that is also inhabitable is Australia. So how on earth did all the Americans get from America to Australia to inhabit Australia after the end of the world, or after all of the world has been made toxic aside from Australia? And why would Australia be oppressed by the UK? Or be okay with being oppressed by the UK again? And why does this film contain no Australian accents, to my recollection, and next to no Aboriginals, when, the film is making a bit of a metaphor for the plight of the Aboriginal to some extent, with, the whole let's murder you all and come in and take your land stuff. The United Kingdom isn't even on the opposite side of the planet to Australia, so, how the scary elevator that goes through the core of the planet is meant to work for those various sides of the planet doesn't make too much sense. But honestly, you're allowed to get away with that because it's an elevator that goes right through the middle of the planet, and it's played like a roller coaster, and there's this scary moment where everybody goes weightless or whatever, because they're passing right through the middle, and gravity is starting to shift to being on the other side, and so all their seats turn over so that as the train elevator thing they're on, it's all this ridiculous looking tube thing. So I guess there's a bit of the symbolism of taking transport into London or whatever, if the rich world is meant to be a stand-in for Great Britain. And I presume the city that they're in is London, since there's not exactly a huge amount of metropolitan areas outside of London that anyone in the United States would be able to recognise or even name, with the exception of Birmingham, and most Americans that have heard of Birmingham presume that it's under Sharia law. This whole film feels like it's the United Kingdom and Australia, so Americans don't really have to think about all the imperialism they're doing, because if the part of the world that was perfectly inhabitable was America, and the part of the world that has all the workers and resources was somewhere like well, I mean, name virtually anywhere else. Suddenly, the cinema-going public might actually have to think about how fucking scary that level of symbolism is. And the difference really between America and England is actually kind of on speaking terms somewhat with all the people we used to oppress. At least, like, people are polite about it these days with us and are still willing to talk to us, rather than the sort of scary stuff we're doing that is now being represented as an evil army of robots being sent to Australia to force the Aboriginal population into concentration camps and to learn English and to give up their existing culture. I mean, just because we went around doing that stuff doesn't mean we should always be the bad guys in a film about some Nazi-esque quest for Lebensraum where the world's poor are being slaughtered just to give the rich more living space and more resources. Just because the United Kingdom consistently was the bad guy against American settlers and the Boer settlers, and oh god, we really did invade a load of places with white-speaking natives and such. Do you see how much more weight and symbolism is added by this film being set on Earth instead of Mars? Just naming a country suddenly makes it a lot scarier and a lot less simple than when Arnold Schwarzenegger was questioning whether things were real or not, and then cracking one-liners as he uses silly technology like a helmet that makes him look like some old woman, so that he can go around shooting all these bad guys and talking to a taxi driver with a mutant arm and talking to three-breasted hookers. And this film is so much at once simpler and more complex, because hey, we can safely shoot at all these robots and the cars can drive upside down, but we're going to Australia and Great Britain is trying to invade them again. And here's a section of action sequences right before we go and meet Bill Nye, who in this film is playing a non-mutant version of that cool guy in the original that everybody knows about, that's like, oh god, it's an evil mutant inside of his chest. And, right, the main character gets told he's a hero right as the main character figures out that he was the villain, and honestly, this film is so much like the original one. On reflection, actually, this is pretty much exactly as good as the Schwarzenegger film was. Like, it's about the same sort of stuff, really. It hits similar beats. It's a serviceable enough action film, but, you know, nobody was really going to write home much about Total Recall beyond the fact that it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger action film. And Arnold Schwarzenegger action films aren't exactly all memorable. I don't hear anybody going on about Sixth Day anytime recently. It's a serviceable action film, this Total Recall thing. The original is kind of cult, but there was nothing sacred there. There was nothing unremakeable there that couldn't be just stuck in a remake film. And this remake isn't a sin of a remake, it's just a remake. It's another Total Recall if you want to watch another Total Recall. And really, I mean, the villain in this film is a lot more entertaining than the villain in Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger one, because this one happens to have Bryan Cranston, the man who anyone who never saw Malcolm in the Middle is going to probably say is the man from Breaking Bad, instead of, say, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, playing the evil president of the world. And he is absolutely amazing as the villain. He even fist fights the main character. Bryan Cranston fist fighting a white working middle class American who's replaced Arnold Schwarzenegger, whose accent is kind of completely unremarkable. Why should you watch Total Recall? You should watch it if it was on telly. Don't go looking it up, but you might as well watch it if you're looking for an action flick to watch and it's on TV and you can record it for later. Or if you're on Netflix and you can't find anything else. I mean, I don't know if this thing's on Netflix. I don't need to go looking for it. I've already seen it once. Bryan Cranston playing the evil president is so much fun to watch, and the CGI fights are silly enough, and the main character and his love interest aren't the most engaging, but the fights are just going to keep you content for a lazy Sunday afternoon as you sip a glass of rose wine diluted with apple juice like I do, or, I don't know, beer or something else. And at the very least, that's how I watch these sorts of things. It is a tradition in my family to just stick on something you can fall asleep watching. Just put that on after you've had your Sunday roast. Thanks for listening.